Hi, I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 16 of
Don't Die Dumb.
We have a lot of subjects to cover today, and some people had suggestions, which I'll talk about. Number one, they wanted us to talk about healthcare in New Mexico. And I see now that people keep saying we're dead last. They point out that we're dead last in so many things. One of the reasons is because we don't have water, so you can't have heavy industry. The Jupiter project down near the Texas border in southeastern New Mexico is going to use millions of gallons of water. But and that worries me. But let's talk about healthcare. We are losing doctors. They're talking about we lost 250 doctors in this state.
Right. This is a state doctors emigrate from, and there are a number of reasons for it, but the top two are probably wages are low here. You move 100 miles in any direction, you're going to get a raise. And litigation is really, really high in New Mexico. Often we're number one in the nation. I don't know where we stand right now, but we're near the top in terms of lawsuits. Lawsuits do not improve health care. And yes, lawyers that are listening, I'm aware that you can point to some particular situation or another where lawsuits in fact have improved health care. But overall, they clearly do not. And safety engineers know this. We've talked about this before. So if you don't want access to doctors, you should drive them out by having very low wages and very high litigation rates. And we are winning that fight. We are chasing doctors out in droves.
Okay, well, that's the problem. What's the solution?
Well-
Isn't there and I'm sorry to interrupt you here, isn't there a bill now to fight that?
Actually, all of the proposed healthcare reforms went through this time, which is probably a good thing, but I can't talk at length about it because didn't know this question was coming and didn't prep for it. Okay? So I like to do homework before diving into stuff.
Not
But
me.
We can do that
Well, I
later.
got an opinion, can be backed up by absolutely nothing. I just put it out there. Now, isn't there a way that we could reward for doctors just graduating to spend 2 years in a poverty-stricken area?
We do quite a lot to try to accomplish that, but not enough to overcome those two big obstacles that I mentioned. And I was about to say, part of the way that we're, and I'm gonna touch a third rail here. Sorry, we're gonna get some negative feedback on this, and that's good. We'll talk about it. But what's happening is we're replacing doctors with what are called APPs, Advanced Practice Providers, and this would be nurse practitioners, some of whom do have terminal degrees, and or PAs. But the problem with this is that just having time in grade as a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a PA does not prepare you to take on the role of physician, because the fundamental way that we think, what we're trained to think about, the actual thing that we do isn't the same. So they may have lots of clinical experience and they may get really good at recognizing things they've often seen before, but they don't have the analytic or problem solving or treatment designing background that physicians do. That is the difference in our education. And by the way, they'd be the first to tell you that I wouldn't be a very good PA or nurse. So why should it surprise anyone that it works the other way as well? We actually have qualitatively different training. And therefore, my pitch to you listeners is to tell your healthcare providers you want an MD or a DO, not an APP. Now, where would an APP be appropriate? There are places where they are, where there's no new diagnosis to make and no new treatment plan to design, where it's about surveillance and maintenance, which are big and super important parts of medicine. Yes, they can probably step into those roles. But the problem is we're using them as if they were physicians. Well, if I've been a nurse practitioner for 10 years, I'm just as good as a physician. You might be as good, but you're not as good at the same thing, which is a difference everybody is underestimating. So that fix, inserting APPs when people think they're going to see a doctor, is not the correct fix for this problem.
Since I've been here, other than specialists, I've never seen a doctor. I see a nurse practitioner. And I have to give her credit. She spends a lot of time with me, probably over an hour every time I see her. But the big protection I have and I don't know if it's protection enough, is every time I go in, I demand to have blood work done. And they don't always want to do it, but I tell them, I want blood work done. For me and you to sit here and talk about my health, that doesn't help me. If you can get the blood work done and analyze it and tell me what come up, and I get that through the patient portal, I think that helps a lot.
Well, and also you highlighted one of the real advantages that APPs have. So again, for surveillance and maintenance, I wouldn't quite make the same statement. And the fact is that because they charge less per hour, though the prices are getting more comparable, they can spend more time with you. The time pressure on them is less, and so you have the impression that APPs care about me more. They give me more face time, and they do, because they're not being squeezed to see as many patients per hour, ideally. Now, some of them actually are, you're getting the worst of everything. They're supposed to see 40 patients a day, and they don't have the appropriate training. So as long as everything stays routine, and everything is what it looks like, that'll work. But whenever those aren't true, you're going to wish that you had somebody with a different kind of training. And notice I didn't say more or better training, I said a different kind of training. I really want to make that point that we're talking about the sort of training, not just the amount of training.
Staying in the health field, but getting a little off target here, is the fact that I'm seeing on television and hearing on radio a big push for liver pills. You can fix your liver with a pill. Can you? I think it maybe I'm wrong. Well, no, they're pushing this heavy because people are, number one, a lot of us are obese, and number two, a lot of us are heavy drinkers. I say, why can't we have both? No.
You know, and you could take pills made from ground up kidneys to regrow your kidneys, and pills made from ground up brains to regrow your brains. By the way, my dad did used to eat brain cheese, which is sliced up pig brains, on the theory that it would improve his cognition. Really, this is homeopathic magic, and I'm not aware. I will say this isn't something I looked at before the show, but I'm not aware of any particular reason why liver pills would be better than, say, iron supplementation.
All right, well, so be it. Now, we're taking our viewers to heart. You send us suggestions. Somebody wanted us to talk about the Native Americans in New Mexico. I will tell you this, that a lot of Native Americans, and I saw this when I lived in Arizona, on the res in Arizona, they have Army recruiters there constantly because it's a way to get out of poverty. You do have a job and you have benefits afterward. So they recruit them real heavy, a great majority of them. And once they get into the service, and it happens here in New Mexico as well, what they do is they feed them Fox News 24/7. So these young kids that were nice and grew up in a matriarchal society come out with all these phony, fake, macho ideas and all these almost white supremacist ideas from Fox News that's been drilled into them. I think it's very harmful for their society.
And by almost white supremacist, you mean white supremacist. I mean, let's face it, when the Supreme Court okayed profiling on the basis of skin color and accents, that's pretty much white supremacist stuff at work there. We've always recruited people of color because they have always been a socioeconomically depressed group in this country, and they make great cannon fodder because, hey, it's not as important as if you lose a white person, right?
Well, how can we help the Native American community? If we could just get more trade schools and make it cheaper to go to school, that would help 100%. So, and a lot of the Hispanics are raised, and it's not my opinion, it's what I've been told. Get out of high school, get a job, you're fine. Support your family, that's all you need. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that, certainly. But I don't think it gives them the advancement they need.
I agree. A lot of my friends who are of Mexican extraction do tell me that same thing, that within that culture, higher education isn't especially valued. Interestingly, one of the topics I did have prepared for today was, what are some jobs that can survive in the face of AI and robots? And a lot of the jobs that we have relegated in the past to women and people of color are the ones that will survive. Caretaking, crafts, trades, things like that. Manufacturing, which for some reason is something that right-wing right-wing, lower-income Americans think, boy, if we bring back manufacturing, we'll all be okay. No, that's low-hanging fruit for robots. AI and robots took over manufacturing a long time ago. And if we crank up manufacturing, we'll have a lot more pollution and a lot more carbon-pumping energy usage, but we won't have a lot more jobs because that's exactly what robots are better at than we are. However, things like carving, making wooden furniture, any kind of furniture really, plumbing, carpentry, construction, all that hands-on stuff, AI and robots can't and won't for the near future. I don't know what will be possible in the distant future, but over the next couple of generations, those will be relatively safe jobs. My job, physician, is actually low-hanging fruit for AI because the way that I was trained to think and reason is exactly the way AI is trained to think and reason. But it has perfect memory and access to all of the most current data in the world simultaneously. So my clan thought we were bulletproof to AI. We're actually going to be one of the early ones to have to at least change, maybe disappear. Manufacturing and professions are both at risk from AI and robots, or I'll say it the other way around, robots and AI. And therefore, a lot of the jobs that we have thought of as sort of the second tier are going to become first-tier jobs in the coming generation.
A lot of actors are so scared that AI is going to take over. And in fact, for background actors, it very well could. And it could take over for
Pete
a lot
himself
of actors.
is an AI actor. Watch this. My hand goes right through him. See that?
No, if I was an AI actor, I'd be getting a lot more work because I'd be better at what I do.
I'd be way better looking, at least.
Yeah. That's for sure. I got a face like a jar full of worms. What can I tell you, huh? But the point is, a lot of people are worried about what about nursing, medical assistant, those type of things.
Actually, those are very hands-on. I would put them in with trades, and I realize that classically we think of trades as somehow lesser than professions. I never have, but I certainly don't mean it that way in this context. I mean, in terms of things that can survive AI, yeah, nurses and aides and techs and PAs. So I just finished saying APPs aren't really replacements for doctors. But you know what? Doctors aren't replacements for them, and they can't as easily be replaced by AI or robots.
Now, what is the answer? Because we will not have enough jobs for the population in the future.
Well, for one thing, we need to stop telling everybody to have more babies. We may have needed a giant population to get here, but we don't need it to stay here, and the world cannot support the number of people it has right now. The pronatalists are literally trying to bring about the apocalypse, and some of them actually like the idea of an apocalypse. It's like the fulfillment of God's plan and so forth. But that is terrible policy for a government.
I have the theory I always have that overpopulation is the root of almost all our problems. You don't have enough, you have too much population, you don't have enough jobs. You have too much population, there's not enough money to go around. There's not enough money and jobs to go around, people in desperation turn to crime.
So we saw a real world example of this. As Japan's birth rate was falling, what happened was that a smaller new generation was inheriting from a larger prior generation, and the net effect was they had one of their wealthiest generations ever. The same thing will happen in this country. The millennials are set up to inherit more on a relative and per capita basis than any previous generation in American history. So on the one hand, millennials kind of resent that prior generations have all the cars and houses and everything, but on the other hand, they're going to inherit all that stuff. So if the population shrinks for a while, then that shrinking population becomes wealthier by default for a while. Now, your first thought will be, well, you can't shrink forever, you'll become extinct, and that is true. But you also can't grow forever or you'll become extinct. What you have to do is be in equilibrium with your resources, and right now we are far on the overpopulated side of our resources. So if we were to have a net population decline for a while, at some point we'd have to say, okay, this is as low as we want to go. But we're many generations removed from that. It will be a long time very long time. None of us will be alive. Nobody listening right now will be alive by the time we get to that point. But yeah, that's in the future.
China has had drastic population drops, and now they're calling for people to increase population. The problem is they've seen the advantages of not overpopulating, and they don't want to do it. The white Christian nationalists are telling all their white friends to have 6, 7 babies. They're telling them that's the only way you're going to become a majority again, like that's a big deal.
Yeah, breeding your way into numbers superiority, breeding your way into the majority is not a winning strategy because we're already consuming everything faster than we can replace it. But it is a great way to keep women under your thumb, because if they're staying home pregnant or taking care of babies all the time, well, then you don't have to deal with them out in the workplace. You don't have to treat them like human beings. You can treat them like the domestic servants you have made them become, because where are they going to go? They got no career trajectory if they're staying home making and raising babies. So I think a big part of the white nationalist thing is also a male dominance thing, and it's about controlling women. But it's also about trying to breed your way into a voting bloc, and that is a war everybody will lose. It's like having a nuclear war. It's mutual assured destruction.
Now, another viewer asked if we could talk about abortion, but they asked because Coffee is a medical professional, if we could talk about when does exactly life begin? And I know this is very controversial, but you want us to talk about it? Why not? Is after insemination, there's a zygote before it becomes a human?
The zygote is before. So a sperm or an egg are zygotes.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, gametes. You said it right, I said it wrong. Sorry, once they combine, they become a zygote. Pardon me.
And is that alive?
Well, it's alive in the sense that it's living tissue. It's alive in the same sense that a bacterium is alive. Mm-hmm. The real question is, at what point should we consider it as a person? And that's obviously a value judgment, but the range is bigger than you might guess. There are literally people who think every single sperm should culminate in a human being. A, there's not as many eggs as there are sperm. It's not even possible. And B, it would take like a week for the world to be 20 feet deep in people. We would die just by crushing each other if it were even possible to get there. So no, that obviously is unrealistic. There are also cultures that don't name their babies or count them into birth mortality, neonatal mortality statistics until they're a year old. A baby that dies within the first year, in some cultures, is considered the same as a baby that was born dead. So those represent the extremes. A year old before we count it as a citizen, or every single sperm. And there's a number of benchmarks you could look at in between that people argue over. It's not strictly a medical question, so I cannot answer it in that way. But it is a combination of medical and values, and I can point out some of the medical ways that you might look at it. So right now, what the far right is pushing for, well, is succeeding at, is that if there's a heartbeat, it counts as a person. That comes from a time in the past when pretty much the only thing we could measure was a heartbeat. And when your heart stopped, you pretty much died. But we have artificial hearts now. We have bypass. We actually have ambulances that have heart-lung machines right on them. If you take a heart out of a living creature, like out of a cow or a human, and just hold it in your hand, it'll beat there for a while. But by no stretch of the imagination are you holding a person in your hand. There's no cognition, there's no mind in that heart. So the presence of a beating heart clearly is not the presence of a person. That we can say for sure. So beating heart is around 5 weeks is when we can begin to detect that. But a functional neurologic system occurs much later. Now, one thing people say, so here's another benchmark, and I can't remember the number of weeks, but at a certain point, the nervous system is developed enough that during the process of an abortion, the fetus will appear to struggle. However, that doesn't require a brain. You could actually stimulate a decapitated human body and make it move its arms and its legs and things. In fact, when we used to do that with frog legs and the like, that was called galvanism, and it's the reason that people thought electricity was literally the life force. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was written during a time when that was a prevailing theory, and it invokes that. So another point at which you might make this case is, well, when does the brain look like a fully developed brain? But that's not going to be very helpful because that's around 8 years old. And we know the prefrontal cortex, the part that makes us fully functional human beings with a mature superego, that's like 25. So nobody, including me, is holding out for a benchmark of 25 years old. Before that, you don't count as a person, right? Philosophically, people have gone from, well, when does it have the potential to become a person? When it's a zygote, a fertilized egg. When does it start to look like a person? 10-ish weeks maybe. When does it appear to have some kind of thought process? There is some thought that fetuses have something equivalent to dreaming. We see their limbs moving as if they're beginning to practice how to move them, but it's not clear whether that involves any form of consciousness or not. Most of us, I don't think any of us can actually remember being born. People who think they can are probably imagining that they can. But how could I be sure, right? So you could argue that a newborn baby isn't yet a person if it doesn't have any thoughts that anybody can detect or can remember later or anything like that. So these are some of the benchmarks that you could look at. And this is kind of where I think the discussions about abortion ought to go. Instead of it's all this or it's all that, or my ideology is this, well, my ideology is that, we could start saying, well, what does it mean to be a person and when does that start to count? And that absolutely would not be a zygote. A zygote has nothing neurologic in it at all. So it's got to be something later than that, but it's clearly before 8 years old.
I hate to see a young mother who didn't want a kid, or she's not just a case of rape or incest, but she's pregnant now. She doesn't want a kid. She's not old enough and mature enough really to take care of the child on her own. And now, because of abortion laws, anti-abortion laws, she's sentenced to 18 years of solitude and
more than
servitude.
That, because she won't be able to re-enter the workforce after that.
Yeah. And then you take laws in Texas that even if a woman is raped, okay, so someone mentally ill attacks her, and now she's got to suffer for 18 years, 20 years because of this, and raise someone who also might have a violent mental streak to them. I will tell you this, I predict this, that Texas, because they have such strict abortion laws, and because they have a high poverty rate, they're going to have one of the biggest welfare states, not in America, but in the world, in the next 10 to 15 years.
And also elevated crime rates.
Yeah.
Because kids who grow up in these terrible socioeconomic conditions are more likely to become relative sociopaths and relatively uninterested in their community or treating others well or obeying laws and things like that. And we've seen that before. Now, it is controversial, but Stephen Levitt of Freakonomics makes the case that Roe versus Wade was the reason that crime rates have been falling basically throughout Pete and my lifetimes. In spite of the fact that you keep hearing that it's rising, it's not. It's been falling in America. It'll rise in this city or that city for a while. There are places and periods during which it rises temporarily, but as an overall trend, it's been falling steadily throughout our lifetimes. If Stephen Levitt is correct, it'll begin rising again about 17 years from now.
I want to give a plug to a PBS program called The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. I believe the entire series was 35 hours. It's just a guy talking in front of a camera. But it is so captivating. At one time, and it might still be, the largest watched program ever in the history of PBS. And the reason is, he gives rise to the theory that the things that we take for granted, baptism, confirmation, things that we say, yeah, I did it, who cares? The idea of getting together on Thanksgiving, getting together on Christmas, these are very, very important. A funeral. Someone might say, and I've often thought it, What's the difference? They're dead. Why am I there for them? They're gone. It doesn't mean anything. But he gives power to the idea that, yes, it does mean something for everyone around. It creates order in our society. Your thoughts?
I mean, the point that he was making was that shared rituals bind us to each other, and they give us a shared common culture. And so I just finished saying that with abortion, this question was one of the best questions. It's not, which of these two extremes do you endorse, Coffee and Pete? It was, what are some of the stepping stones along the way, and how do we decide among them? That's a really sophisticated question. Another one that I think we should have as a national conversation is what truly are what shared values can we agree on at the governmental and society level? For example, one that we have nearly universal agreement on, but take for granted, I'm going back to Joseph Campbell in a sense here, is contract enforcement. If I sign a contract to buy a house, the bank needs to believe it can get its money from me, and I need to believe I'm going to own that house. Punishing crimes where we harm each other, and so forth. Places where we might disagree are, do we all have to belong to the same religion? Do we have to be the same color? Should we only share materials in our public libraries that reflect Western European culture? And not all of it. Plato just got canceled in Texas because apparently he's not as gender limited in his thinking as the Texas lawmakers would like him to be. So Plato was more tolerant of third gender ideology than conservatives would like. So conservatives think purity, making us all be and think and act and dress and look the same, is a legitimate, they regard the government as a moral authority, which is ironic considering that our government right now laughs at morals. It doesn't have any shared morals at all presently. Whatever gets them what they want, that's the win. What are your thoughts about what are potential things we could agree on as a culture? Do we believe in religious freedom or religious conformity? Do we believe that we're a country which has benefited from immigration, including enforced immigration like Africans, or deceitful immigration like the Chinese who built the railroads, or displacement immigration like Native Americans, who are now considered foreigners by the far right, which is ironic? Or are we a nation that should limit itself to fair-skinned people of Western European descent, both cognitively and genetically?
Now, I would ask you, the viewer, tell me who's next. First it was Muslims, then it was Mexicans, not Hispanics, but Mexicans, and now it's Somalians. Who do you think's next on this?
Oh, I know the answer. Ooh, pick me.
You think you
pick
know?
me, pick
Yes.
me. They just shot a white male ICU nurse who was protesting ICE because he was carrying a concealed weapon that he had a permit for, and that they had removed from him before they shot him in self-defense. Nor did he ever draw it. They saw it, threw him on the ground, 6 guys were on top of him, they're handcuffing him, and then they shot him. They already had him under control, already had control of the weapon, and it was a weapon he legally could carry. Now, a huge part of the maggot's base is people who think everybody in the world should be carrying a gun. Well, white male with a permitted concealed weapon, this is your fate if ICE notices that gun on your person. Is that the government you thought you voted for? You knuckleheads? You thought you could oppress everybody else and not get your turn? What were you thinking? Have you never read a history book?
The suppression of the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, calling every protester an insurrectionist, that worries me. I was out at a protest earlier this week in Albuquerque, in uptown Albuquerque, and I got to hand it to Deb Holland. It was cold, miserable out. She came out there, no fanfare. When they had a time to make a speech, she didn't do it. She just came out and protested with us. Most people didn't even recognize her. She was bundled up. I got to hand it to her. I hear people saying, well, she's not strong enough. I don't care who you vote for, but it doesn't have to be someone who's a big blowhard and a BSer. a quiet woman that gets things done. There's strength in that, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Women exhibit a tremendous kind of strength that doesn't come from the body. And the strength that comes from the body, as we see in our octogenarian president, fades over time. If he ever was strong, he certainly is not now physically. So why do we think that somehow being a male makes him a better leader? This is not a person who has any personal toughness whatsoever. Not his fault. Bone spurs. He would have gone. He would have won Vietnam for us. But bone spurs.
Now, before we leave, we got some derogatory things from MAGA people last week.
Well, before we get to the derogatory, I want to say you sent in some great ideas for future topics, more than we can hit on today, and we are definitely following up on those ideas, which is making this at least more interesting for us. So
Very much so.
keep sending in ideas of stuff you'd like us to do a little homework on. We live for that, and it makes this way more interactive. So thank you for that.
And what I want to end on is you MAGA viewers. It's okay you're derogatory, but tell, okay, you want to tell me I'm an a-hole? That's okay. Tell me why I'm an a-hole. Tell me how I could improve so I won't be the type of person you just naturally hate, okay? If you got some constructive things, we'd love to hear it. Until that time, until next time, I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
And remember,
Don't die dumb.